Neil from Essex here to walk around the implement yard here with you a little bit today. We're going to walk around and we're going to look at different manufacturers' implements and specifically look at the grades of implements that they offer. Oftentimes we're going to see too heavy of a tractor running with an implement from too light of a series, and you can guess that in many cases that can end up wrong. So we're going to walk around a little bit here today with Lampride and Woods and show you some of their naming nomenclature on their implements and attachments, and some of the build quality differences as you increment up through different series.
Essex, a helping hand with your land.
So before looking at any attachments, the first thing that you should understand is that model numbers more often than not mean things. It's really helpful to us when walking around the parking lot to be able to look at these numbers and understand a little bit about what we're showing you. Might be helpful to you too to know what it is that you might have bought or what you might be shopping for. And Lampride model numbers, the first ones here are going to tell you the kind of implement that it is. So RCR, I don't know what it stands for, but it could probably be like rear cutter rotary, something to that effect. BBs are box blades. LR, landscape rake, right? The letters here at the beginning, they're gonna tell you what that implement is. The next two numbers are gonna be a series indicator. The higher the numbers are, the heavier the implement is. Unfortunately, these don't fall into tidy horsepower ranges, but there are some consistencies in here. Anything that starts with an 05 is made for subcompact tractors, for Kubota's BX series, generally machines under 25 horsepower on small frames. Once you move up, your first kind of standard duty series is either going to be a 12 or a 15, and as you continue to move up into heavier duty, say medium and heavy duty implements, you'll see some 18s and even 25s and 35s. Bigger numbers are better. They're the heavier built implements out of the series as you see those numbers go up. The last two numbers are generally going to be the width of the implement. And so in this case, this is a 60-inch rotary cutter. Sitting beside me here is a 72-inch landscape rake. Now, when you're sizing these implements to your tractors, you're gonna wanna have an idea how wide the back of your machine is. Usually, in most cases, you want an implement that is at least as wide as your back tires. And keep in mind, if that implement is one that angles, you want to add about a foot onto that implement so that the implement, when it's turned sideways, still covers the track of your machine. So broadly, make sure your implements are as wide as your tractor. I'm going to start focusing here on a 60-inch rotary cutter, and I picked this one specifically because 60 inches is appropriate for tractors that can be as small as in the low 20s of horsepower to machines as high as 40, right? Nearly double the size spectrum of those two machines. In terms of horsepower and weight, you're gonna run a 60-inch rotary cutter. And there's gonna be some that are appropriate for those smaller tractors and some appropriate for the larger ones. But what actually makes those differences, right? Both these cutters are gonna pin up behind both of these tractors, but one's right and one's not. The first thing that I'm gonna look at is gonna be the gearbox. As gearboxes get heavier, there are higher horsepower gearboxes, they often are gonna come along with longer warranties. And there are cases among these implement companies that they're not just using off-the-shelf gearboxes. Sometimes in these gearboxes, there's engineering done that if there's damage from the underside of those gearboxes, that easy repairs and stuff can be done. So many of these companies are going to talk at length about the horsepower of their gearbox and some of the design features of them, because those things matter in the durability of that gearbox. Another thing that I look at is whether the edge of the deck here is welded or rolled. You're going to notice this welded seam right here. If a rock or something comes underneath this mower, strikes the bottom of it, breaking that weld is a lot easier than if that deck shell is rolled over. You also can look at that piece there and gauge the thickness of the steel. As mower decks go up and we go into these higher series, you're going to find thicker steel around here, but also a deeper deck shell in many cases. The deeper that deck is, the more volume of grass it's going to be able to handle underneath the deck, allowing it to cut deeper and thicker and heavier material. You're going to want a little bit higher horsepower tractor to go along with it. So while we can look at that 60-inch rotary cutter and notice some things that on a 40 horsepower tractor should probably be a little bit more heavy duty, you can see how things change here when we go up into the next product series. So this is an RCR 1860, still a 60-inch rotary cutter, but that 18 series is gonna up the game here in a couple of different areas on this mower. So you very quickly can notice here from this gearbox, this is obviously a much larger, much higher horsepower gearbox. It's gonna come along with a longer 5-year warranty. The steel all around the deck is a little bit heavier. It's gonna last a little bit longer. You're gonna notice the corners right here are rounded over rather than being bent and welded. Not having that weld seam along here is one less thing to break if you catch a big rock under the back corner of your mower, so the construction is going to be a little bit heavier. We're able to option up these mowers with more sophisticated things, right? We could put slip clutch drive lines on them. If you hit rocks and that kind of stuff, that drive line is going to be able to slip and not break a shear pin, requiring you to get off the tractor and go put that back in place again in order to continue working. Things like this high horsepower gearbox, like that slip clutch, like, you know, the bigger, thicker metal and the curves, these things all cost money. So a cutter like this can cost 30 and 40% more expensive than the entry-level model does. But when 60-inch rotary cutters are sometimes put behind tractors as much as 40 horsepower, you need some of these features in your higher horsepower machines. I have two implements in front of me here that are a good example of the capacity differences that are being driven by that implement series. Right here is a GS grading scraper 05 from that subcompact series. 48, telling us that it's 48 inches wide. This implement is going to be proportionally a little bit smaller all around in order to limit the amount of dirt that can be collected in this grading scraper, so that a subcompact tractor is still able to appropriately pull it through the dirt. You could buy one of these things in a GS 1548, right? That 15 series is going to be made for a higher horsepower machine. You're going to notice the sides are going to be higher, the box is going to be longer, the blades are going to be spread out more, and you're going to be able to collect more dirt in it, just like you do here in this box blade, right? The box gets bigger, more dirt's kept on the inside, and you need to have a bigger tractor to pull it. So oftentimes when we look at implements, we're sizing things just looking for the appropriate width for our tractor. But oftentimes you got to look beyond that to the capacity that's being held inside that implement and make sure your machine is going to be able to pull it appropriately. Lampride makes that a little easier for us by putting those first two digits in there that give us an idea of the sizing of that implement. This practice of denoting implement durability with an indicator in your model number isn't limited to just Lampride. These Woods attachments here do the same thing. They label things a little bit differently. Those first letters, again, are going to tell us what kind of implement is. So this TK7220 is a turf keeper. They're named for a finish mower. 72 is our width, and 20 is the build quality. It's the series that's out of. You can see the difference here between these two implements in front and in back of me. This is out of the 20 series, this is out of the next implement up, the 40 series. And there's a number of different differences. You can see the difference in the size and the bulk of the hitch that attaches to your tractor, the difference in the caster wheels that are carrying the weight of the mower along. There's a lot heavier build in the next series up. Underneath the belts here, if we remove the shields, you'd find heavier cast components, thicker belts in those drive systems. And unsurprisingly, the gearboxes are of a different horsepower class and a 3-year versus 6-year warranty. So a lot of differences here in the construction of these mowers. Even though they're both basically the same size, there's a big difference in the way that they're going to hold up on your machine over the long haul. Continuing down the line here, we have some interesting differences between this landscape rake and this rear blade. There's often a lot of commonality between these implements, right? The hitches and everything are often identical between the two, and it's just a different blade assembly that's put around the back. But you're going to notice here in the standard duty series, this is only going to rotate left and right, but when we move up to the heavy duty series, we can get things like hydraulic cylinders to do that rotation. but also the ability to rotate this direction as well, right? Allowing you to do things like crown driveways and stuff that you can't do with the standard duty series. You're gonna notice the hitches too are radically different. There's a lot more options of where to put your 3-point arm, and the size and the heft of the steel is completely different. So even though we're dealing with basically the same width implements, the features, the functionality, the build quality is completely different even within the product line. Another thing you should watch here in this conversation of implements is know your standard features and what on your implement is considered an upgrade. Just because you're paying more money doesn't necessarily mean you're getting this implement from the upper series, right? You might be looking at a lower series implement that's been optioned up with some extra niceties, right? There can be surprising options on many of these things. Look at this rotary cutter right here. You're gonna notice currently across the back of this mower, there's a rubber flap. That can be swapped out with chain shielding. And in the case of this PTO shaft right here, some of these are gonna have regular yokes on them with a shear bolt in here that's gonna break if you hit something. They can be optioned up with a slip clutch that's gonna allow that drive line to slip if it catches something. Those two features right there can be the cost of about $600 on this mower right here, which is about the same cost as the next model up, right? So don't assume that more money always means that higher series. Also pay attention to how your implements are equipped. So if there's any point here, it's that the question of which company builds a good quality implement is not so easily answered. When you're sizing an implement to your tractor, buying the right quality implement out of a manufacturer's product line actually requires a little bit of research. And sizing something to your back tires is smart. You always want to do that. But you also need to look at the horsepower of your tractor and how you're going to be using that implement to know exactly where in these product lines you should be falling. There's many cases where you can do this wrong and very easily tear up an implement. And we're going to see pictures all over the internet of people that have broken things that they felt shouldn't have broken. And many times it's a scenario like this, right? Where the implement wasn't sized correctly to the tractor. For us as salespeople, it can be tempting to go through and grab the cheapest stuff out of these product lines to be able to give you an attractive price. But the best thing that we can do for you as a buyer and for you in the shopping process is to get out here and walk around all of this stuff. Take a look at the different things that are out here in the parking lot. Gauge these differences, because when you're looking at things in person, it's very quick and easy to pick up on the build quality differences between these things in a way that you will never see looking at pictures on the internet or fanning through a glossy brochure. So we have got acres of equipment and attachments out here to be able to come out and do this with you. It is the thing that we do here at Messix as salespeople that kind of makes our job special sometimes, right? It's more than selling stuff, it's the educational time to be able to come out here and help you understand equipment a little bit better. So if you're shopping for any of this machinery and we can help, or if you've got parts or service needs for equipment you've already got, give us a call. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messix.com. It's unfortunate that so many of these videos are about things that bother me on the internet. Instead of responding to comments, I just go make a video about it.